Welcome to Compiler Tales. Please don't forget to subscribe. Now the tale begins. Donovan Miles was born in Ajigunle, a Lagos suburb known more for its flooded streets and rickety rooftops than for birthing billionaires. His father was a mechanic, his mother a petty trader who sold pap and accra by the roadside. From the age of 9, Donovan understood the language of survival. He fixed discarded mobile phones, reprogrammed used SIM cards, and traded rechargeable torches for cash. At 13, he had already mastered how to source cheap China electronics through a borrowed laptop at a cyber cafe. While his peers dreamed of becoming footballers or musicians, Donovan obsessed over logistics. "If I can move things faster, I can make more money," he often said. By the time he turned 20, he had registered a small company called SwiftLink that coordinated local deliveries using Okadas. What began as a hustle soon became a business model, one that grew legs of its own. The turning point came when Donovan signed his first contract with a major online retailer, promising 24-hour delivery to inner cities. People laughed, saying it was impossible in Nigeria. But Donovan wasn't a man who accepted limits. He hired jobless youth, trained them for weeks, gave them uniforms, GPS trackers, and rebranded delivery in Lagos. He scaled up fast, using his street-smart intuition to negotiate impossible deals with customs officers, state governments, and e-commerce giants. By age 30, his company was expanding into Ghana and Kenya. Investors took notice. International press dubbed him the Jeff Bezos of Africa. Yet beneath the Rolex watches and well-cut suits, Donovan still carried the sharp-eyed paranoia of someone who had once been betrayed by hunger. He didn't celebrate much. He didn't trust easily. He always kept his private life private, until the weight of his own success began to isolate him. Though Donovan now lived in a sprawling Banana Island mansion equipped with smart systems and an indoor gym, the house felt hauntingly quiet. He didn't have many friends, and the women who chased him were more fascinated by the wealth than the man behind it. He had been burned once, deeply, by a former fiancée, Maid, who manipulated her way into his accounts and tried to blackmail him when the wedding was 2 weeks away. Since then, he guarded his emotions the same way he protected his trade secrets. But as days blurred into nights filled with board meetings, lonely dinners, and empty victories, Donovan felt a hollowness creeping in. He wanted peace. He wanted a soft voice around the house. A helper, not a lover. A presence, not a pressure. That was when he decided to hire a full-time live-in maid. Not just any maid, but someone disciplined, humble, and easy on the eyes. Someone who wouldn't make noise or demands. But fate had other plans. Donovan sat on his balcony one humid evening, sipping lemon water as the sun disappeared into the lagoon's horizon. The house was too quiet. Every footstep echoed. The silence mocked him. His home automation system played soft jazz in the background, but even that felt robotic. He had grown powerful but emotionally depleted. Every conversation with people felt transactional. His personal assistant only discussed logistics. The security man only greeted with, "Good morning, sir." His chef only asked what he wanted to eat. And when he went to sleep, he didn't dream. That was the cost of building an empire with high walls. He needed a human presence, a gentle one that would blend into the background but warm the air in the house. It was then that he made the call to a premium maid agency in Lekki Phase 1, one recommended by a discreet fellow billionaire. The agency sent in files and pictures. Some applicants looked too polished, too city slick. Others looked too plain. One file caught his eye. Amira Musa, 24 years old, from Kano. Speaks fluent English and Hausa. Good with children. Previously worked with diplomats. Her picture wasn't too glam, but she had an effortless beauty. Brown skin that looked like bronze under good lighting. High cheekbones, a thoughtful gaze, and neat braids. Her references were solid. Within 3 days, Amira was scheduled for an interview. She arrived wearing a clean Ankara skirt and a white blouse that looked slightly worn but ironed with care. She didn't try to impress. She stood straight, answered questions with humility, and didn't oversell herself. Donovan barely needed 10 minutes. He nodded once and said, "You start tomorrow." That was the beginning of a bond that neither of them saw coming. For Amira, the job was a blessing. She had been job hunting for months, surviving off her savings and the occasional help from her cousin, who lived in K2. After her parents passed away in a ghastly car accident on Abuja Road, she left school in her third year to find work in Lagos. She had always admired Donovan from afar, his interviews, his business mindset, even his charity work in northern Nigeria. She never imagined she'd work in his house. From the first day, she made herself invisible in the right ways, tidying the house before he woke, preparing his favorite meals without asking, ensuring his laundry smelled faintly of lemon and not the harsh detergents most maids used. Donovan began to notice, but not in the way a man notices a woman, at least not yet. To him, she was order, stillness, comfort, a rare kind of presence, and that would soon become a problem. Amir's first week in the Banana Island mansion was like a dream dipped in uncertainty. Everything was marble, chrome, and silence. She had never stepped foot in a house with voice-controlled doors or a fridge that sent shopping lists to the owner's phone. She tiptoed around, afraid to touch too much, but she was a quick learner. Within days, she had memorized Donovan's routine: 6 a.m. gym, 7 a.m. fruit smoothie, 8 a.m. Zoom calls, lunch at 1 p.m., no carbs after 6. She never waited for instructions. She acted ahead of time. The kitchen sparkled. The bathroom smelled like eucalyptus, and Donovan began to unconsciously relax when she was around. He didn't praise her, but the way he lingered in the kitchen longer than necessary was proof she was doing something right. Amira didn't talk much, but her eyes spoke volumes. Quietly, she began to imagine what it might feel like to be more than just a maid. Her admiration for Donovan had roots. Back in Kano, she had read about his story in a local blog post, how a boy from the slums of Ajigunle became one of Nigeria's most respected tech minds. She watched his TEDx talks, followed him anonymously on Instagram, and dreamed about building a business like his. When she lost her parents, her dreams shattered like glass, but working in his house felt like destiny giving her a second chance to be close to greatness. However, with admiration came emotional vulnerability. Every time he smiled, said thank you, or looked lost in thought, her heart skipped. She didn't plan to fall for him, but there was something magnetic about him. The quiet confidence, the calm with which he made decisions, the way his shirts always smelled like expensive cologne and peppermint. She tried to bury the feelings, but they grew roots. Meanwhile, Donovan started to notice her, first with professional appreciation, then with personal curiosity. It wasn't just that Amira was beautiful, it was her calmness. She didn't giggle unnecessarily. She didn't seek his attention. When she walked, it was graceful, not loud. And her meals tasted like someone had cooked with thought, not duty. He started asking casual questions. Where are you from again? Or, did you learn to cook jollof like that in Kano? It wasn't flirting, not yet, but it was dangerous. He told himself she was just a good maid, nothing more. But that night, as he watched her walk to her quarters through the garden, her silhouette against the twilight, a strange thought entered his mind. What if? He shook it off. He was a billionaire. She was a maid. The line couldn't be crossed, but it already had in their minds. As the weeks progressed, a soft tension grew between Donovan and Amira, one neither of them spoke about, but both felt like an itch beneath the skin. Amira became more efficient, more graceful, almost intuitive. She knew when to step away and when to be present. Donovan began taking longer breakfasts just to watch her move around the kitchen. Her laughter, rare but gentle, echoed in his memory even after she had gone. He started catching himself staring at her when she wasn't looking. During dinners, he asked her to join him once or twice, under the guise of staff appreciation. They sat like boss and servant, but in those moments, their conversations bordered on personal. Do you miss Kano? He asked once. She nodded. But some new places feel safer, she whispered. He didn't ask her to explain. He understood in silence. Amira tried to control her emotions, but the more Donovan softened towards her, the harder it became. Every compliment from him felt like fire under her skin. He never touched her inappropriately, but the way he looked at her sometimes made her feel naked. One night, she overheard him on a business call. He was calm but firm, dismissing a partner who failed to deliver. If I can't trust you, "I can't work with you," he said. The word stayed with her. She wanted him to trust her, not just as a maid, but as a woman. She started dressing more neatly, tying her hair differently, wearing her best modest clothes even during chores. Still, she said nothing about her feelings. She feared that even her eyes might betray her secrets. But desire, even silent, has its own voice. Donovan began feeling conflicted. He was no fool. He had seen what power did to men, how wealth turned relationships into conquests. He never wanted to be that man. But every time Amira entered the room, his restraint chipped away. Her humility only made her more attractive. He started buying her gifts, small things at first. A better apron, then a pair of sandals, then a Zara bag. She always accepted with confusion and thanks, never demanding more. It was her silence that haunted him. He told himself he was just being kind. But deep down he knew. Kola noticed too, and what came next would change everything. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon when Kola Adekunle, Donovan's childhood friend turned business partner, came over to the mansion for their routine weekend hangout. Kola had always been the more grounded of the two, less ambitious, more family-oriented, but equally sharp. As they played a game of pool beside the infinity-edge swimming pool, Donovan casually mentioned Amira in conversation. "She's different, bro, quiet, respectful, and neat. It's like she understands my entire rhythm," Donovan said while lining up a shot. Kola raised his brows. "You day watch 'em like that?" he asked, feigning innocence. Donovan chuckled, trying to deflect the conversation. But Kola wasn't done. He leaned over and added, "Guy, no day reason her matter like that, oh. She's your maid. Cross line no day get break." His tone shifted to seriousness. "I've seen this before. The girl might look innocent now, but feelings day grow for both sides when lines blur." Donovan waved him off, laughing. "A beg leave that thing. Not everyone is a gold digger." Still, Kola's words stayed with him more than he admitted. That night, as Donovan lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the echoes of Kola's warning rang in his mind. He knew Amira had been nothing but diligent and proper since the day she arrived. She hadn't once overstepped her boundaries. But still, the way her eyes lingered slightly too long, the way she smiled when she served his food, and how she quietly hummed when she was folding laundry, it had become familiar, almost intimate. He began to ask himself uncomfortable questions. Was he seeing things? Or had the energy between them changed? Yet, instead of pulling back, Donovan found himself drawn even closer. He started noticing the scent of her coconut hair cream, the softness in her good mornings, and the gentle confidence in her walk. The mansion that once echoed with loneliness now seemed warmer with her presence. Kola tried to bring it up again during a brunch meeting at Eco Hotel weeks later, this time more directly. "Don, no be every beautiful thing we suppose touch," he said, tapping his wine glass. "Think about your reputation, your business, your peace of mind." Donovan smiled politely, but didn't engage. He had already made his decision, even if he hadn't acted on it yet. The truth was, he didn't see Amira as a threat. He saw her as safe, unlike the women who orbited his billionaire status, flashing fake smiles and designer bags. He convinced himself that Amira wasn't interested in anything beyond her job, and even if she was, he had control over the situation. What Donovan failed to realize was that the very idea of control would soon become the beginning of his undoing. It was the night of SwiftLink's expansion celebration. Donovan's logistics company had just secured a $15 million investment deal that would scale their services across West Africa. The champagne flowed endlessly at the Victoria Island Event Hall, and congratulations poured in from governors, CEOs, and old classmates. Donovan gave his usual thank you speech, charming, brief, and humble. But deep down, he couldn't wait to get home. There was an emptiness to the glamour, a fatigue that no amount of accolades could fix. When he arrived at his Banana Island home that night, it was well past midnight. The mansion was dimly lit, except for the hallway leading to his bedroom. Amira, still dressed in her wrapper and tank top, had waited up to ensure he returned safely, like she always did after major events. "Welcome back, sir," she said softly. Donovan nodded, visibly exhausted, alcohol swirling in his veins. She reached for his briefcase. Their fingers brushed. He didn't pull away. Without saying much, she walked him to his room, and as he sat on the edge of his bed, she handed him water and paracetamol for the hangover he was bound to have by morning. He looked up at her, really looked. The room was still. She stood in front of him, unsure of what to do. Then, slowly, he reached up and touched her face. She flinched slightly, but she didn't move away. His thumb ran down the side of her cheek. "You're always here," he murmured. She nodded, and in that quiet, impulsive moment, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't passionate or wild. It was confused, searching. And still, she didn't stop him. She melted into it, her heart thudding against her ribcage. What followed was a night neither of them would ever be able to rewrite. Soft touches, unspoken emotions, and a silence deeper than guilt. The next morning was awkward. Donovan avoided her eyes as he dressed up for his 8 a.m. video call with investors. Amira didn't linger in the hallway like usual. She stayed in the kitchen longer than needed, her heart heavy with the uncertainty of what had happened. When they finally crossed paths again by the dining area, Donovan gave a nod and said, "Thanks for yesterday," as though she'd helped him fix a broken cabinet. Amira smiled weakly, unable to ask what now. Days passed, and neither of them addressed the moment. But it didn't end there. One accidental kiss became two. Two became stolen nights, and soon they had an affair, quiet, cautious, and cloaked in shadows. No promises were made, but Amira's heart couldn't help but hope. And Donovan, he kept convincing himself he was still in control, that he could stop any time. But hearts, once entangled, don't obey logic. Amira found herself caught in a delicate web of emotions she had never prepared for. Her mornings were brighter, her chores lighter, and her heart fuller. Every time Donovan gave her a compliment, bought her a new outfit, or even stayed a little longer in the kitchen just to hear her talk about life in Kano, she believed, perhaps foolishly, that she meant more to him than convenience. She began imagining a future, even if blurry, maybe not as a wife, but as someone who belonged to him. She started being more careful with how she looked around the house. Her braids were always neat. Her skin glowed from coconut oil. She paid more attention to her diction, and while she never made any demands, she hoped her quiet loyalty would speak louder than words. After all, she had never asked him for anything. Everything she got, he gave of his own will. Donovan, however, was not as emotionally available as she imagined. He appreciated Amira's gentleness and the fact that she didn't come with drama. But in his mind, their arrangement was still temporary. He never introduced her to anyone. When Kola visited, she was back to being the maid. And when Donovan started taking her to high-end boutiques or gifting her things he'd never buy for his own sister, he justified it with, "I'm just rewarding good service." Still, the conflict began brewing inside him. He found himself pausing work to think about her, rereading her WhatsApp messages, or mentally replaying the way she laughed. He started sleeping at home more instead of at his penthouse downtown. The guilt crept in quietly, but so did the craving for her presence. The problem wasn't what they had done. The problem was that he now needed it to feel whole. But no relationship, not even one built on silence, remains hidden forever. The house security guards began to suspect. The cook, Mama Ada, once walked into the hallway at 2 a.m. and saw Amira leaving Donovan's room. Rumors circulated quietly among the staff, but no one dared speak. Amira, for all her discipline, began to feel uneasy. She had no title, no protection, and no clarity. And in her heart, she started yearning for validation, a word, a gesture, anything that confirmed she wasn't just a placeholder in his life. But each time she tried to bring up the subject, Donovan brushed it off. "Let's not complicate things," he'd say, "or you worry too much." Still she stayed, because in her mind, she had come too far, and in Donovan's mind, he believed he had full control. What neither of them knew was that a single moment, a missed period, was about to shatter every illusion they had built. Amira had always been punctual, her cycles, her routines, her life. So when she missed her period, the first thing she thought was stress. After all, juggling chores, navigating unspoken emotions, and managing the emotional whiplash of being close to Donovan was enough to throw any woman off. But by the second week, her stomach turned differently. The smell of eggs made her nauseous. The aroma of Donovan's cologne, once comforting, made her dizzy. She bought a test kit discreetly from a pharmacy near Lekki and waited till midnight when everyone was asleep. In the tiny bathroom near her quarters, the two pink lines stared back at her like betrayal. Her hand trembled. The test fell to the floor. She didn't cry. She just sat there for an hour, wondering whether to feel joy or dread. Was this child a blessing or a ticking time bomb? Telling Donovan was harder than she imagined. She rehearsed it 1,000 times. Finally, one evening, while setting his dinner, she muttered, "Sir, I need to talk to you." Donovan raised his brow, but gestured for her to continue. "I am pregnant." The silence that followed could have drowned her. Donovan put down his fork and stared at her, eyes narrowing like he was solving a puzzle. "How?" he asked coldly. The question cut deeper than a slap. Amira tried to speak, but he raised a hand. "You planned this, didn't you? Is that why you kept quiet all this while?" Amira shook her head, stunned. "No, sir. I didn't. I swear." "Don't swear," he barked. His calm demeanor evaporated. "You think I'm a fool? You want to trap me with a child? Me, of all people." She felt like the floor was falling from under her. The man who once looked at her like light now saw her as darkness. Donovan left the table, went into his study, and didn't come out till the next morning. Amira didn't sleep. Her body ached, not from pregnancy, but from emotional betrayal. When Donovan finally spoke to her again, it wasn't with softness, it was with precision. "I'll give you money. You will leave this house. Do not contact me again." Amira cried. She pleaded. She explained that she didn't plan any of it. But Donovan, drowned in fear, pride, and the terror of a scandal, couldn't hear her. He gave her a check. He packed her bags. And just like that, Amira, the girl who had once brightened the mansion's walls with her silent affection, was thrown out, broken, and carrying life within her. And yet, the deepest consequences had not even begun to unfold. The morning after their argument, Amira sat in silence on the edge of her small bed in the maid's quarters, her hands cradling her stomach as though she could shield her unborn child from the whirlwind outside. She hadn't slept, her eyes swollen from the tears she fought not to shed audibly. When the knock came, it was sharp, urgent. It was James, one of the domestic staff. "Ogase make you pack your things." Now," he muttered with eyes that avoided hers. Amira stood slowly, unsure if she was dreaming. Within minutes, her small box was packed, her uniforms folded, her personal items zipped into a second-hand Gonna-Must-Go bag. Donovan stood by the front door, wearing a crisp shirt and emotionless expression. He handed her a white envelope with a check inside, Nigerian naira 2 million. "Take this. You'll be fine. Don't come back here." His voice was flat, clinical. Amira opened her mouth to speak, but her voice cracked before any words came. She turned, clutching her bag, and walked out of the mansion without looking back, her body trembling not from fear, but devastation. As she exited the estate gate, the world outside seemed louder, more chaotic than she remembered. Banana Island's leafy boulevards gave way to the rumbling Danfos and honking Kiki Napep of Ikoi. She had nowhere to go. Her cousin Fatima, who lived in Ijiboode, was her only option. She boarded a bus, nausea rising with each bump in the road, the driver's Afrobeat playlist only intensifying the dizziness. She sat by the window, her eyes blurry from tears she refused to let fall. She remembered how Donovan used to smile at her, how his gifts felt like tokens of affection, and how naively she had believed there was a future for them. But what hurt more wasn't the rejection. It was that he thought she had planned it all, that she was just another schemer after his money. She looked down at her belly, barely beginning to show, and whispered, "I don't regret you." It was the only truth she could hold on to. Meanwhile, Donovan remained at his home, pacing through rooms that now felt emptier than ever. For the first time, he felt the coldness of silence. It wasn't the same as before Amira came. It was worse. Her absence echoed in every corridor. The kitchen felt stale. The garden, once lively with her early morning sweeping, seemed lifeless. But he told himself this was for the best. She had tried to trap him. Hadn't Kola warned him? He had dodged a scandal. Still, something gnawed at him. He looked at the spot where she used to leave his coffee each morning and felt something like guilt, though he refused to name it. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared out at the lagoon, pretending he hadn't just thrown away a piece of his soul. But deep within, he knew something irreversible had happened, and the weight of it was only beginning to sink in. Ijebuode welcomed Amira with the humid air of survival and the scent of firewood smoke from neighbors preparing their evening meals. Fatima, her older cousin, received her without questions. They shared a small two-room flat with zinc roofing and a wooden door that creaked whenever the wind blew hard. Fatima worked as a nurse assistant in a local clinic and offered what she could: space, support, and silence. Amira spent most days lying down, consumed by morning sickness and silent grief. The pregnancy was harder than she expected. There were days her joints ached so badly she couldn't stand to cook, nights when her tears soaked the pillow, and she cried without sound to avoid disturbing Fatima. But through it all, she clung to one truth. Her baby was hers alone, untouched by shame. She would raise this child with the same strength her mother raised her, with dignity, even if the world called it disgrace. Months passed, and Amira gave birth to a healthy baby boy under the fluorescent lights of a modest government hospital. The nurse smiled as she handed the child to her. "He looks like his papa," she said casually. Amira didn't respond. She stared at the newborn, overwhelmed by the fragility and power in her arms. She named him Camel, meaning perfect in Arabic. His tiny fingers gripped hers tightly, and she whispered promises of love, protection, and peace. Though her bank balance had dwindled, she refused to touch the check Donovan gave her. It sat inside a plastic folder, locked in a drawer. It wasn't pride, it was principle. She wouldn't let his money raise her son. Instead, she started sewing again. Fatima had a friend who let her use an old Singer sewing machine, and Amira began making wrappers, baby clothes, and repairing torn school uniforms for small change. Bit by bit, Amira built a life. She walked the dusty roads of Ijebuode with Camel wrapped in ankara on her back, balancing a basin of fabric on her head. Her reputation grew. Customers praised her neat stitches and soft hands. Children gathered around her when she set up a stool outside her window to sew under the sun. The pain of Donovan's betrayal faded, not because she forgot, but because motherhood demanded all her energy. She found peace in Camel's laughter, in the way he cooed at the rooster outside, or the way his little feet kicked wildly when she sang lullabies. She still thought of Donovan sometimes, late at night, when Camel slept and silence returned, not with bitterness, but with a strange, hollow longing. But she knew one thing with certainty: whatever future she carved, it would be one where Camel would never feel like a mistake. Back in Banana Island, Donovan sat in his office one morning, staring blankly at his tablet while his assistant explained quarterly projections. He nodded absently, his mind elsewhere. The house was quieter than ever. Mama Ada, the chef, had resigned 2 weeks after Amira's departure. She claimed she needed to return to the village, but Donovan suspected it was more than that. The other house staff avoided his gaze, and though no one said it, he felt their judgment in the silence. Each night, when he returned from work, he expected to hear soft humming from the kitchen or the clatter of sewing tools from Amira's corner. But the rooms remained still, sterile. Every item in the house reminded him of her, from the rose-patterned curtains she had chosen to the silver cutlery she polished to a sparkle. He began spending longer hours at work, trying to silence the ache in his chest with meetings and numbers. Kola visited again after several weeks, this time sensing something was deeply wrong. "You've been off lately," he said, sipping water as they sat in Donovan's study. "What's really going on?" Donovan was silent for a moment. Then finally, he confessed in a hoarse voice. She was pregnant. Kola's eyes widened. "What? Amira?" Donovan nodded, unable to speak more. "And you sent her away?" Kola's voice was heavy with disbelief. Donovan looked away. "I thought she trapped me. It felt like a setup." Kola shook his head. "Not that girl. You know it deep down. You made a mistake, Don. The words sliced through him. It was the first time someone had verbalized what his heart had been whispering for weeks. Regret, thick and suffocating, rose in his throat. But the damage had already been done, and he had no idea where she'd gone. That night, Donovan sat on the edge of his bed, staring at a framed photo on the wall, one taken at a tech summit the year before. Amira had helped him pick the suit he wore that day. He remembered her smile when he emerged from the closet, and how he caught her eyes lingering on him. He shut his eyes and let the silence wrap around him like a shroud. His pride had cost him something he couldn't name, but deeply mourned. He didn't want to admit it, but part of him longed to hear that she was okay, that the baby, his baby, was okay. But even if he tried to find her, what would he say? Sorry? Would that ever be enough? As he drifted to sleep, he whispered to no one in particular, I didn't mean to lose you. But apologies, like broken mirrors, didn't always put things back together. It was a humid afternoon when Donovan overheard the conversation that jolted him from his numbness. Two former staff, James, the housekeeper, and Hadiza, the temporary cook, were chatting near the garden. They thought he was inside. Shidan born now, oh, Hadiza said. Fine baby boy. The Pekin resemble Oga no be small. Donovan froze. He stepped out quietly and stood behind a pillar, listening. Now for Ijiba she go. Her cousin Day there. But them say she don comet again. Maybe travel go one village like that. The words hit him like a blow to the chest. Asson, his son? The thought made his knees weak. He stepped back into the house, without them noticing, and closed the door behind him. For a long time, he just stood there, staring into space. The guilt that had been a slow drip turned into a flood. That evening, Donovan didn't touch his food. He went upstairs, opened his laptop, and began scrolling through old security footage. He paused at the scenes that showed Amira walking through the garden, feeding the fish, arranging flowers near the gate. He zoomed into her face. She had always looked gentle, but in those recordings, she looked fragile. His eyes welled up. He picked up his phone and called his driver. Tomorrow, we're going to Ijibood. Find her cousin. The driver didn't ask questions. Donovan sat back, pulse racing. For the first time, it wasn't about ego or cleaning up a scandal. It was about responsibility, about making things right. He didn't know what he would say or how she would react, but he needed to see his child. He needed to look into eyes that may carry his own. The next morning, they drove for hours, weaving through traffic, potholes, and red sand roads. They found the compound where Amira had once stayed, but Fatima was gone. A neighbor, chewing sugarcane on a stool, said, Dem don move. Maybe 3 weeks now. Dem pakeveiting. Go one village near Oyo side. I no remember the name. Donovan's heart sank. He gave the man money, hoping for more information, but none came. The trail had gone cold again. Back in the car, Donovan stared out the window, the scenery a blur. He felt like a man chasing his own shadow, always close, never catching it. He didn't know if he'd ever see her again, or his son, but for the first time in his life, he knew that no amount of money, power, or success could substitute the ache of an absent child, and that truth was a punishment all its own. Under the sweltering sun of Ogun State, a mere small tailoring shop had slowly become a beacon in the dusty neighborhood. Nestled behind Fatima's compound and partitioned with makeshift plywood and a faded curtain, the space was humble, but alive. Threads and scraps of ankara lay across the bench like fallen confetti, a sign of steady work. Amira would strap Camel to her back as she bent over the humming sewing machine, his chubby hands sometimes reaching for her earrings or tugging gently on her braids. At just over 2 years old, Camel had become her entire world, his laughter her music, his milestones her victory. When he started saying mama and learned to run with crooked legs into her arms, Amira's heart would burst anew each time. The villagers adored them. Many didn't know her full story, but they could see she was a woman who had been broken and was now slowly rebuilding, brick by emotional brick. Despite the challenges, Amira had found peace in the routines of rural life. Early morning markets, tailoring appointments, evenings under the mango tree feeding camel-boiled yam. These became her sacred rhythms. She never spoke of Donovan. Even when Fatima brought up his name once, in passing, Amira had simply responded, "He's gone," and that chapter is closed. But in truth, it wasn't. There were nights when the silence crept in and her thoughts strayed back to him. His cologne, the softness in his voice when he wasn't wearing his pride, the way he used to laugh like a man who didn't believe in joy but found it anyway. She often wondered if he had moved on, if he thought about her, if he thought about Camel. But these questions lived only in her journal, locked away in a drawer she never reopened. Her love had turned to dust, and she had learned to breathe in it. Camel was growing fast. He asked endless questions and had Donovan's exact eyes, wide, curious, and stubborn. Sometimes Amira stared at him while he slept and saw the man who broke her, and yet, paradoxically, the child who saved her. Camel's birth gave her a second life. She had become resilient, patient, and unexpectedly wise. The love she gave him wasn't the kind written in fairy tales. It was the raw, everyday kind, feeding him before herself, selling her gold necklace for his school fees, humming him to sleep even when her back ached. Still, as she tucked him into bed one evening, and he looked up and asked, "Mama, where's my daddy?" her heart clenched. She smiled softly and said, "He's far away, baby, but you have me." Then she turned away, so he wouldn't see the tears that whispered, "But will he come for you?" Donovan had mastered the art of distraction. He threw himself into boardroom meetings, investment calls, and corporate charity campaigns. But even as his net worth climbed, a hollowness nested inside him like a silent tenant. Each time he stood on a podium giving speeches about youth empowerment and transformation, a voice inside whispered, "What about your own son?" He couldn't shake the image of the boy the former staff had mentioned, the one who looked just like him. Pride had made him throw a mirror out. Now, that same pride was chaining his feet, making it hard to admit the one truth he could no longer ignore. He had failed her, failed their child, failed himself. The problem wasn't resources. It was redemption. And redemption demanded more than money. It demanded humility. So, for the first time in years, Donovan removed the mask he wore so confidently in public and let himself bleed in private. Kola had become the only person he trusted to see him unravel. Over suya and palm wine in his Lekki balcony, Donovan finally admitted, "I think I broke something I can't fix." Kola, always the voice of grounded reason, replied, "Not everything needs to be fixed. Some things just need to be faced." Donovan knew what he had to do. He contacted a private investigator, giving explicit instructions to locate Amira discreetly. No harassment, no pressure. Find her, and the child. But don't scare them, he said. At the same time, Donovan started doing something strange, attending parenting workshops. At first, he pretended it was for a CSR project. But soon, he found himself taking notes, asking questions, and internally preparing for something he wasn't sure he'd ever get. A second chance to be a father. Redemption had begun planting seeds, but he knew it would take time to grow anything that resembled forgiveness. Back home, Donovan sat on his couch one night scrolling through his camera roll. He stumbled upon a rare photo, Amira in the kitchen, looking up with a smile as someone captured her candidly. She hadn't known he took it. In that moment, she wasn't a maid. She wasn't a mistake. She was a woman full of grace, strength, and warmth. He stared at the image for a long time. Then he whispered to the empty room, "I'm sorry." It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't even heard. But it was the first crack in the wall of denial he had built. What Donovan didn't know was that across the country, in a tiny village house, a little boy was learning how to write his name on a chalkboard. And that boy had his eyes, both in color and in yearning. The investigator Donovan hired was thorough, a retired DSS officer with ties across the Southwest. He retraced Amira's last known location to Ijibuode, spoke to neighbors, pieced together timelines, and returned with a thin folder of possibilities. "She's not in Ijibu anymore," he told Donovan during a late-night briefing. "She moved with her child, maybe to a village closer to Oyo State. She's kept a low profile. No social media, no bank traces. Very careful woman." Donovan nodded slowly. It hurt, but it impressed him too. Amira wasn't hiding because she was afraid. She was hiding because she was protecting something, someone. Their son. Keep going, he instructed. And when you find them, don't approach. Just bring me proof they're okay. The days turned to weeks. Donovan's appetite waned. His mind was filled with imagined versions of Camel. What he might look like, what games he liked, if he laughed the way Donovan used to when he was a boy. Amira, meanwhile, had moved again, not out of fear, but out of instinct. The growing buzz around her in Ijibu made her nervous. Business was booming too quickly. People asked too many questions. She relocated to a sleepy community near Fiditai, where she rented a small clay house and began anew. Camel was now in nursery school. She taught tailoring part-time at a women's co-op. She smiled often, laughed freely with neighbors, and planted maize in the small backyard. But at night, she sometimes felt a shadow, like the past was walking slowly behind her. When she heard someone had come asking questions about a tall, light-skinned woman with a small boy, she froze. Her heart raced. Could it be Donovan? Was he looking for them? And if he was, why now? She couldn't afford another heartbreak. Her life had finally found balance, and she wouldn't let history rattle it. Unaware of her fear, Donovan waited restlessly for news. He tried to focus on work, on growth plans, on his new CSR education campaign. But everything felt muted. His world had become a grayscale replica of what it once was. Even the mansion, with its grandeur, felt like a cage now. He walked into the nursery he had started redecorating, originally meant for future plans, but now filled with unopened toys, untouched books, and a crib that had never been used. He stood there and asked aloud, "Will even want to know me?" And the silence replied with brutal honesty, "That's not your decision to make anymore." One Tuesday evening, Donovan was pacing in his office when the investigator called. His voice, usually measured, had a hint of excitement. "Sir, I found them." Donovan froze. "Where?" he asked, gripping the edge of his desk. "A small village near Fiditai. I spoke to a local teacher who recognized her description. She's using a different name. But the child, sir, you need to see something." Minutes later, an image landed in Donovan's inbox. It was slightly grainy, taken from a distance, but clear enough. A boy, about 2 or 3, was playing with a tire beside a mud-walled house. He was barefoot, laughing, his tiny legs chasing the wheel down a dirt path. But it was his face that shattered Donovan. The boy had his exact eyes, large, curious, almond-shaped. Donovan sank into his chair, the phone falling from his hand. He stared at the screen for what felt like hours, blinking back tears that he didn't know he could still cry. He zoomed in, noticing other details, the tilt of the boy's head, the high cheekbones, the crooked grin. "That's my son," he whispered, like saying it out loud might make it more real. All the walls he had built, all the justifications he clung to, collapsed in that moment. This wasn't a theory anymore. It was a fact. He had a child, and that child was growing up without him. Donovan thought of all the missed moments, the first laugh, first step, first word. He wasn't there for any of it. His chest ached. But even in the pain, a new resolve began to rise. He would find a way to reconnect. Not forcefully, not arrogantly, gently, patiently. He wouldn't repeat the mistake of pride. He wanted to be a father, not a conqueror. That night, Donovan did something he hadn't done in years. He prayed. Kneeling beside his bed, he said no fancy words, just a single line. "Let me earn this second chance." He knew it wouldn't be easy. Amira might never forgive him. Camel might never accept him. But he owed it to them, and to himself, to try. The next day, he wrote a letter, not as a billionaire, but as a broken man seeking redemption. He folded it with trembling hands and added a small photo of himself and his mother, his only childhood picture. "So he knows where he came from," he wrote. Then he handed it to his investigator, with only one instruction: deliver this gently. Donovan sat quietly in the front row of an empty chapel lawn after the parenting seminar ended. The speaker had talked about empathy, responsibility, and repairing emotional bonds, words that felt like arrows. When everyone left, he stayed behind, shoulders heavy, eyes dim. He wasn't the man who fired Amira anymore. He was a man haunted by the silence of his own blood. Eventually, Pastor Ideal approached him. Donovan had known the cleric for years, but never confided in him. Now, broken and raw, he told the truth about Amira, the baby, the dismissal, and the boy he only just discovered. When he finished, the pastor placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Redemption isn't just apology. It's change. It's patience. It's humility. And you must be ready to give without expecting anything in return." Donovan nodded, eyes glassy. For the first time, he stopped defending his actions. He accepted them. That night, he walked into his master bedroom and opened the nursery he had never used. He switched on the night light, sat in the rocking chair, and stared at the crib. A gift from months ago, one he had considered discarding. Now it felt sacred. He took out a notepad and began writing. "Dear Camel, you don't know me yet, but I'm your father." He wrote without stopping, tears falling onto the page. He wrote about his mistakes, his regrets, and his hopes. By the time he finished, the sun was rising, and his soul felt lighter. He began making small changes, donating anonymously to orphanages, sponsoring health care for single mothers, mentoring young men from underserved communities. These were not acts of penance. They were steps toward becoming the kind of man his son might someday be proud of. Still, Donovan knew redemption wasn't guaranteed. He might never meet Camel. Amira might never forgive him. But he was ready to try. Slowly, he started to reframe his longing from guilt to purpose. He printed the blurry photo of Camel, framed it, and placed it beside his desk at work. His staff noticed a change. He was calmer, more present, and surprisingly humble. Kola watched in quiet awe. "You're changing," he told Donovan one day. Donovan smiled, but didn't respond. Change wasn't something to boast about. It was something to prove. And even if his past could not be erased, his future could still be rewritten. If not for Amira, then for the boy who unknowingly made a billionaire question what real wealth truly meant. Life in Fiddatai had been peaceful until a quiet ripple disturbed the waters. Amira heard whispers in the market. "A man was asking about you." Then another. He was light-skinned, well-dressed. He showed a photo of a boy. Her heart pounded in her chest. She knew. She didn't need to ask questions. Donovan had found them. Panic spread through her body like fire. Was he here to take Camel? To shame her? To upend the fragile peace she had built? She sat alone that night, staring at the kerosene lamp flickering shadows on the wall. Camel was asleep beside her, thumb in mouth. The thought of losing him crippled her. Her past came rushing back. Donovan's cruelty, the coldness in his eyes when he sent her away. She shook her head. "He's not taking you," she whispered to her son. Never. Amira had changed. She was no longer the quiet girl cleaning a mansion in Banana Island. She was a mother now, a protector. And if Donovan thought he could march in and reclaim what he discarded, he had another thing coming. Still, a part of her hesitated. What if he had changed? What if he wanted to make peace? These thoughts made her angry. She didn't want to feel pity. She didn't want to feel anything for him again. So she packed. Again. She closed her business, gave her sewing machine to another woman at the co-op, and moved deeper inland, to a remote village near Saki. There were no tarmac roads there, no cell signal, just bush paths, yam farms, and the kind of anonymity she desperately needed. She erased all digital trails. No bank transfers, no calls. She even changed her name again. And just like that, she vanished once more. But peace didn't return instantly. The more she tried to run, the more Camel asked questions. "Mama, who was the man in the photo that teacher showed me?" She froze. "Nobody, baby." But he kept asking, "Don't I have a daddy?" His innocent eyes wounded her deeply. "Why don't I have what the other boys have?" The questions began to haunt her. She didn't have answers, and her silence was becoming a prison. At night, she dreamt of Donovan, not as the man who hurt her, but as the man crying on the floor, begging for another chance. She would wake up in cold sweat. Was she wrong for denying Camel the chance to know his father? Or was she right for protecting him from a man capable of such cruelty? The answer lay somewhere between fear and forgiveness, but Amira wasn't ready to find it. Not yet. Donovan sat at his desk, letter in hand. It had taken him weeks to write. He had rewritten it 7 times. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because every word felt too small. In the envelope, he placed a letter, a recent photo of himself holding a white rose, and a blank check, not a bribe, a gesture. Use it however you want, the note said, or burn it. Just please let me meet my son. It wasn't desperation, it was truth. For once in his life, Donovan was not leading with pride or wealth. He had stripped himself bare. The letter was delivered to Fitatai by a courier. But when the courier arrived, Amira was gone. Again, the villagers had no forwarding address. She moved suddenly. No goodbye, they said. The envelope was returned unopened. Donovan sat in his study, tears streaming down his face. He placed the letter in a drawer and locked it. It was a different kind of pain now. Not sharp, not dramatic, but heavy, like a rock on his chest that refused to move. He went about his days with a quiet melancholy. He laughed less, spoke less. The sparkle in his eyes had dulled, but he never stopped hoping. Every time a child walked into his charity foundation, he looked twice. Every photo his team shared from the rural literacy program was scrutinized. Maybe this one, he'd think. But it never was. The uncertainty became a lifelong ache, one he bore without complaint. At night, he sat by the window, the framed photo of young Camel in his hand, and whispered the same line. "I'm sorry. I'll wait." Even Kola noticed the transformation. "You're not the same man anymore," he said one afternoon. Donovan smiled faintly. "I hope not." His house was now a museum of what-ifs. The nursery remained untouched. He donated most of his wealth anonymously. He declined interviews. For someone once obsessed with legacy, Donovan had come to understand that the only legacy that mattered was the one that looked at you and called you daddy. And he hadn't earned that yet. Maybe never would. But regret, he had learned, is the price pride charges. And he was still paying. Years passed. The world changed. Donovan's beard turned gray, his step slower. But his heart, it remained tethered to a boy he had never met. Now a quiet philanthropist, he spent his days funding child education projects and building rural clinics. He visited schools no one remembered, shook hands with children who had no idea who he was. Every face he saw carried the possibility of recognition, but none ever matched the boy in his memory. He had seen that photo so many times. It lived in his dreams. In the quiet of his office, he stared at it often. "You're probably taller now," he'd say. "Maybe smarter than me, too." He didn't date again. Didn't marry. The world thought he was content. Only Kola knew the truth. Donovan wasn't living. He was waiting. In a far-off village, Amira walked home under the setting sun. Camel, now nearly 10, ran ahead with a slingshot, chasing shadows and laughter. She smiled, the soft wrinkles around her eyes, telling stories of both joy and sorrow. They passed a primary school where she now taught sewing and literacy. Life was modest but full. Her heart had healed, not by forgetting, but by learning to let go. Yet even she couldn't lie to herself forever. Camel had grown into a young boy with questions she couldn't keep silencing. "Did he ever try to find me?" he asked one evening. Amira looked at him and said, "Yes, many times." The word surprised even her. Maybe one day she would let Camel read the letters she had hidden. Maybe. And somewhere in a dusty schoolyard in Bainway State, Donovan knelt beside a group of pupils during a foundation outreach. A child tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Oga, your idea like my papa own." Donovan chuckled, hiding the lump in his throat. He looked at the sky, hands in his pocket, wind rustling his shirt. "I'll find you," he whispered, "no matter how long it takes." And with that, he walked into the horizon, not knowing that just a few states away, the boy who bore his eyes and name was running barefoot into the arms of a woman who had once been a maid, but had always been a mother first. Please subscribe and turn post notifications on. Thank you for watching.